Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into another episode of Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. We are your hosts, Emma.
And I'm Allie.
And we are so excited to dive into our second installment of our Summer Slasher series and review the film Sleepaway Camp, which is a 1983 cult horror classic.
And you know what's funny is it is a cult horror classic, but I'd never seen it. Have you, Emma?
I have not, and I do not believe that the producer had either. So it's a little crazy because it's one of the top slasher films on a lot of lists out there, put out by a lot of reputable sources.
And the ratings are kind of substantial. They're not bad. They're kind of good.
Just to dive right in, the IMDb score for Sleepaway Camp is a 6.2 out of 10, which is rather high for a horror movie.
And then the tomato meter is 81% and the audience score is 60%, which is kind of weird because I feel like the tomato meter is always more judgmental.
Absolutely. And I think anything over like 50% even, I'm very surprised on the horror, film level, especially a horror film that's pretty old. This is very dated. Mm-hmm. This is actually 40 years old this year, which is sort of wild and makes me a little happy that we're also reviewing it like 40 years later. And a fun fact actually that I learned just yesterday is that this film has a documentary that's going to be coming out. We don't know the exact date yet, but it is on IMDb that it's in pre-production, and it's called Angela, the Sleepaway Camp, like official documentary. So that will be very exciting for us to watch as well.
And we'll get more into Angela, obviously. But another kind of fun fact is this first installment of Sleepaway Camp also has 5, not sequels, but 5 other installments after this initial film.
Before we officially get started, Allie, what are we drinking today?
Listeners, I think you might already know what I'm drinking today.
What she's indulging in.
What I'm indulging in. And I think I know what you're indulging in, Emma.
I'm a little different today.
A little bit.
I'm still in the family. But
You're
I'm a little bit different.
Yes. But I'm a loyal girl.
But you also actually kind of branched out a tiny bit.
So I am not drinking a black cherry White Claw. I'm drinking a mango White Claw. So there you go.
So different flavor. And, it might not be because that was all that they had at the store. But you know what?
It definitely was not because that was all they had at the store. It was definitely not because of that.
And then I am drinking a Pinot Grigio, which is a little bit different from my norm. I usually am a Sauvignon Blanc girl. And the best part is that I am actually drinking a brand called Fat Cat, which brings me to...
Oh, good segue, Emma.
Great segue. We wanted to introduce Allie's cats that you actually might have heard meowing a little bit on our last episode.
Oh, for sure. So... it's a rose, but it's not my rose of the week. But some fun facts. My husband and I adopted 2 5-year-old cats, and their names are Tito and Jameson, although we don't really call them that. Tito is the girl, and we call her Stella, Bella, Tito, Buggy.
She said Bella today, and I had to ask her, I was like, wait, who is Bella? And I thought they had gotten yet another cat, but it's just Tito.
It's just, depends on the mood. And then Jameson is the boy. He's an orange cat, and he is Jameson or James, and that's kind of it.
Or Bubba. I call him Bubba.
Sort of Bubba, yeah.
Yeah, I like Bubba. I kind of call a lot of things in my life Bubba, though. So.
Like me.
Like, yeah. But yeah, so cheers to Al's and her new
My little babies.
Kitties, her rescues.
Yes.
And cheers to episode 3 and episode 2 of our Summer Slasher series.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, so moving right along here into our next part of the podcast, we want to address our roses and thorns from the last couple of weeks. So, Allie, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
I will for sure start. I'm going to start with my thorn because my rose is pretty epic. So my thorn is I'm tired, you guys. And
God, aren't we all?
I know. I mean, 30s, But I've been traveling for... I don't know, the past 2 weeks, and it catches up with you when you're there. I'm not, 21 anymore. I can't do this as much, but so basically I'm just tired, but it does not go, unnoticed, like in my life, why I'm tired. So I had some epic stuff happen, this past couple weeks.
The reasons why she's so tired.
Yes, exactly. So obviously Emma and I went to Midsummer Scream, which was amazing.
Fantastic. Best place ever. Best conference ever.
And then I shot straight into I got to see Taylor Swift. Yeah. So, I'm a spooky girl. I want to be spooky and wear black and, be like dark, but I'm also a sparkly glitter pink girl. Mm-hmm. I'm a juxtaposition. How do you say that?
Juxtaposition. Yep.
It's really hard to say.
No, you did it.
Oh, thank you. But, I can be both.
You can be both.
And Taylor Swift was amazing, I will say.
You can be bejeweled.
And yeah, when I walk in the room.
I'm really trying hard with some Taylor lyrics, but
I can make the whole room shimmer.
Yes. That's where I was going. Okay.
See, I'm too tired to even form lyrics. However, Taylor was awesome, and I was so happy to experience that. And then I had to go straight to Las Vegas. So, oh my gosh, poor me, poor life.
But you also went to a really badass pizza place that was horror themed.
Yes, it's in Las Vegas, and it's right near the Strip. It's called Sliced, and it's horror themed. That. And their crust is made of charcoal crust. I've never even heard of this before. It's charcoal crust.
She sent me a picture and I'm like, this literally looks like a horror piece of pizza. Like if someone was like, let's make it horror.
And I'm pretty critical with pizza because I love pizza.
Yeah.
And highly recommend if you're in Las Vegas ever, or if you live there, highly recommend. It's a very small, random spot, but it's called Sliced. And they have plenty of photo ops and delicious food. Epic.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Emma, what about yours?
Oh, well, my rose, I would say, for the last couple of weeks is I actually just came back from a really fun river trip with some of my best friends that I grew up with and the producer. And we were in the Colorado River and just had such a fun time. I am such a water girly. Anytime I'm in any sort of body of water, I'm just like having the best time. And the weather was fantastic. The company was fantastic. The food was so good. And I'm very, very sad that it's over. And my thorn,
but be happy that it happened.
I'm so happy that it happened.
Yes.
My thorn is that we tried to see the meteor shower, and you would have thought that we would see it out there because we were essentially in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. And it was really, really hard to see, but many little rows in there. Once we laid down on the top of where we were staying, we actually went up to the roof and laid down to look at the meteor shower. I actually saw the biggest shooting star that I've ever seen in my entire life.
I hope you made a wish.
I made several wishes.
Good.
We also saw many a shooting star. Many. But they just weren't in like meteor shower fashion. So we were a little bummed about that. But yeah, that was my rose and thorn.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty great weekend.
Yeah.
Even like your
great.
thorn is just seeing a couple shooting stars rather than some meteors.
I know.
I'll take it.
Yeah, it's just so rude. Life must be going pretty good if that's my thorn.
I think so.
But yeah, so that's our roses and thorns for the week. And the next thing that we really want to chat about real quick is we want to do a very special call out to some of our patrons that have joined our Patreon in the last few weeks since we have actually just launched the podcast in general. I want to call out special call out to Carrie and to Megan. They both subscribed to our top tier on Patreon, which actually gets them, not only are they, supporting the podcast, they get exclusive access to our Discord community, and then they also get to pick a film of their choice for us to do an entire episode on. So I won't spoil what those films are, but I have talked to both of them separately, and I'm really excited to do the films that they requested. They will be coming probably after our Summer Slasher series, so definitely be on the lookout for those.
Yeah, and if you guys want to hear us talk about your favorite horror film or scary film, definitely subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe. And then another thing too, actually, we just posted an Instagram post today where we asked what your favorite horror film is in one of our posts. And if you could just drop it in the comments, that just kind of gives us some more ideas. We have like a very long running list, but we always like to hear from others, or maybe there's a very obscure film that you would love for us to review. We are down for anything and everything in the horror genre, subgenres, anything. So please let us know, and, follow us at Spooky Chicks Horror Flicks on Instagram. Okay, so moving right along to our trivia segment of the podcast, we've got 3 trivia questions that we are going to ask at the beginning of the podcast right now. And we invite all of you at home to also answer them as well. So, if you haven't watched the movie yet, this is a good time to stop and go watch it. And then Allie and I are also going to be keeping our answers to ourselves until the very end when we reveal the answers to the trivia questions. So, Allie, do you want to kick us off with question number 1?
Sure do, Emma. Okay, question number 1. Who was the first person to be killed at the camp?
At the camp. All right, and then question number 2 is, what state was this film shot in? She thinks she knows.
I do know.
But she has no idea.
You have no idea, Emma. Question number 3. What was teenage Angela's first line in the movie?
Ooh, I think I know this one. I did read a fun fact about this, that she does not speak her first line until 31 minutes into the film.
I know who she says it to, too.
I know who she says it to, too. I'm going to write that down just as a bonus point.
Me too.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. So, feel free to set your answers aside, and then we will answer them at the end of the episode. For the synopsis of the film, Angela Baker, a shy, traumatized young girl, is sent to summer camp with her cousin. Shortly after her arrival, anyone with sinister or less than honorable intentions toward her gets their comeuppance.
Is that the full synopsis?
That's what it is.
Okay.
Yep. For anyone who's wondering, comeuppance is a punishment or fate that someone deserves.
You get yours.
He got his comeuppance. Comeuppance. No way.
I know, right? I'm the weakest human in the entire world.
I'd also like to give a quick spoiler alert here. So if you have not seen this film, Sleepaway Camp, 1983, I would advise you to go watch it now. And if you decide to proceed without watching the film, just be warned. It is a little crazy. We're going to have some pretty crazy discussions. Please proceed if you dare.
It's on you.
It's on you. Jumping right into the film, there's a couple things that I want to touch on before we officially get started. And one of them is that this film is directed by Robert Hiltzik. And fun fact about Robert is that he wrote not only this film, but he also had a part in writing the next installments that were made after this film. They were not officially a part of the franchise, but they were sort of just these added films that all kind of came together in the Sleepaway Camp family. And he wrote number 1, number 2, 3, 5, and then also the latest installment, which is Return to Sleepaway Camp, that was released in 2008. So just a fun fact about that, he definitely wrote as many films as he directed and was very much a part of all of this and the entire concept from A to Z. Another fun fact about Robert is the camp that this is actually set at in the film is the actual camp that he went to as a child, which is kind of crazy. And a lot of the inspiration for this film actually is based on some of his own fears that he had as a child at this camp. Very similar to if you listened to our episode on Poltergeist, we talk about how Steven Spielberg actually had a couple of scenes in that film specifically based on some of his childhood fears. So just kind of a fun fact there. And then in terms of the top billed cast, we have Felissa Rose, who plays Angela, Jonathan Turstyn, who plays Ricky, Karen Fields, who plays Judy, Chris Collette, who plays Paul, and Catherine Camhey, who plays Meg. So that's some of our top billed cast. We also have the camp director, whose name is Mel in the film, and he is played by Mike Kellen. And Allie, I think you have an interesting fact about him.
Yeah, there's a sad fact. He actually passed away the year this film was released, which is kind of nuts to know that and watch it. So
yeah. Now that I know that fact too, rewatching it, I did notice, because I guess he was trying to conceal some of his symptoms of lung cancer throughout this film. And I feel like you can almost in the slightest way tell.
You can, because he kind of stumbles a bit.
Yeah.
And now I feel really bad for thinking that and knowing that. But he did a great job, and
what a bang to go out on.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
He became part of a cult classic. So yeah, R.I.P. Mike Kellen. All right, Allie, are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you?
I'm ready. Okay, so we open this movie with a scene of lots of trees, kind of fall-looking trees, and some ominous music playing with the title, Sleepaway Camp.
So what I took away from this opening scene is the music was a little heavy for me.
Definitely.
Because I was like, oh my gosh, this looks like a very beautiful... Also, it's
like a fall scene.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be summer though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, technically, yes.
But I was like, I would for sure play me some Summer Breeze.
We can't do that in all movies, Allie.
I know, right? You're right. I said this. But not the typo negative version.
We're just going to go through all of the versions of Summer Breeze.
Please refer to the last episode if you need context for that. But if you play me some Summer Breeze or something really like head in the heart, something really cute and fallish, I'd go to that camp.
She'd be convinced.
She's
convinced.
There. Yeah.
She's already there.
I love it. But the music they're playing, I was like, oh, okay. We're jumping right into that happy feeling.
Yes. And something that I do want to point out, actually, Allie, based on your comment just now, is that if you notice too, in the opening sequence, I think it's purposely supposed to be fall because they have this also pan shot moment where they go through a very empty lake and camp, but you hear children and adolescents talking in the background as if they're ghosts there.
Well, I thought that was cinematographically pretty cool. Like,
yeah, very cool. Yeah. And it sets you up like, something went down at this camp. And there's even a sign on the very front fence of the camp that says sheriff. And then the camp is actually called Camp Arawak. And there is a sign across the fence that also says for sale. So it's definitely trying to set you up for this. There's something sinister that has gone on at this camp. And, we're about to find out why. Or we're about to find out what.
Or both.
Yeah, or both. And I want to say too, just based on the setting that they don't specifically say where it is, but we can gather by a lot of the accents used in the film and just general kind of geographical features that I would guess that this is probably somewhere in upstate New York. Have I been to upstate New York? I have not. But my mom is from New York and she made a little comment that this seems like New York. So I'm just going to roll with that.
I agree. And also it says it's filmed in New York. So
when does it say that?
IMDb, bitch.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I didn't get that far. But anyway, so my guess was right. Then we get to our next scene and essentially the start of the film, which is a summer view. And again, the camp is kind of in the back and they don't make it very explicitly known that it's the exact camp in the opening scene, but it can be assumed that this is a different shot now at a lively camp, a lively lake during the summertime, and people are enjoying boats. They're on the beach, having a good time. And we immediately get into a scene with a father and his two children. I think it can also be assumed that the children are twins, or at least very close in age siblings, a son and a daughter.
Yeah, and this kind of resonated with me because I, myself, Allie, am a twin. And a lot of the little girl and the boy kind of remind me of how my twin and I would act, playing around in summer and just like running and jumping and potentially pushing an adult into the water and all of that. Yeah. So it definitely resonated with me.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you also forgot to mention that your twin is also a boy. So it's literally almost exactly like the film.
Shout out to Sam. What up?
And in this same scene, we also see kind of at the same time simultaneously, we see a couple of younger adolescent teens, I would say. There's two of them driving a boat and then one of them is water skiing. There is a boy who's driving the boat. And when I say boy, I want to say probably like late high school years, with also a girl who's also probably high school age, and they're driving a boat and she is pestering him because she wants to drive the boat and she wants to go faster. She's like, hey, can I do this? And he's like, absolutely not. I'm not going to let you drive, this and that. So just keep that in your mind that that's kind of happening at the same exact time that this little family, his father and, this father and his kids are just trying to enjoy some time on a little boat. And it should also be noted, too, that they do not have a motorized boat. They have like a little sailboat type thing, rowboat. They unfortunately become victim to the first tragic act in this film.
Essentially, some of the people on that boat get run over.
Yes. Yeah. And before that even happens, too, there is a pretty classic line that I noticed that I wonder if you noticed, too, Allie, where a young girl says, can we go to that camp sometime?
I did notice that, yes.
So that's kind of just an interesting thing I wanted to mention there. But to Allie's point, yes, the people that were water skiing, they unfortunately run into the boat and the dock where this family was, and they end up running over the family.
And not to make light of that situation, horrible, obviously, in this, fictitious scenario, but if you're watching the movie, you're looking at the shot, they're going straight towards this dock and you can clearly see this capsized boat and this family trying, oh my gosh, we're having fun, like trying to get out. These young individuals are just like, oh my God, the acting is horrible.
It's really bad.
It's really bad.
It's bad throughout the whole film. So just a heads up now.
I have a hot take on that too, but we'll get to that.
Okay. Perfect. But yeah, to Ollie's point, it's kind of like you see it coming and it's almost like, okay, you guys had more than enough time to get out of the way. But
just like turn left, just turn right.
Just turn. It's not that hard. Also, I do kind of feel like the father and the children could have potentially gotten out of the way too as well in some way.
Yeah.
But
it is
nevertheless, what happens is that unfortunately we end up seeing the father's body floating by, and he is on his front. So you do not see the front side of him. He's face down in the water.
What I will say, again, not making light of any kind of situation, is there was no, he could,
like, wouldn't he have been more torn up?
He would have been more torn up.
I completely agree. And I had the exact same thoughts. Is we don't know exactly what happened, but maybe he hit his head really badly or something.
But boat ran over him. A motorboat ran over him.
Just trying to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
But yes, a boat ran over him. And then you also get a shot of the little boy, the back of his head. And he is still in his life jacket and he is treading water. And so he is seemingly okay. And then right after you see the father float by, you see another life jacket float to the top. And it is shredded, but with no body.
We don't know much beyond that.
Yeah.
On that scene.
Don't know much after that. And then we immediately pan to a shot 8 years later. And we see immediately a house. And inside the house, we see 2 children who are getting talked to by their aunt. And Angela, who we are assuming is the survivor of the boat accident with her dad and brother, is there. And she now lives with her aunt and her cousin, Ricky. Her Aunt Martha, I will say, seems very
medicated.
I was going to say a little neurotic, little eclectic. She also has really over-exaggerated acting in this, and I think it's worth a view just for anyone that wants to see some really interesting acting in the 80s, and I think she's supposed to be that way.
I have a controversial take.
Oh, okay.
Kind of love Martha.
In what way?
She's stylish. She looks great. She's medicated. Like, she's just living her best life. Is she sane? Absolutely not.
No.
But I was just kind of loving her character.
But we, I think that we don't know a lot about her. So, like, let's give her the benefit of the doubt.
She's also supposed to be a doctor.
She is. She is supposed to be a doctor. And we do find out much later in the film, too, that her husband left her. So I guess we can try to maybe cut her a little bit of slack.
But watch the movie and
let us know what you think about Aunt Martha.
But, like, look through the lens of her supposed to be a doctor. Think about that.
It makes me not trust doctors.
No, I know, right?
But, nonetheless, Aunt Martha decides, that she's going to send Ricky and Angela to a summer camp. She's all excited. She's packed some snacks for them to head on their, voyage. And I want to point out there is an interesting scene, and it can definitely go a little bit unnoticed, but she signed medical, like, physical papers for the kids. And she makes a point to tell Angela and Ricky, like, make sure that you don't mention how you got these. And she says, I am a doctor after all. So at the time you're, like, watching this, you're not really that concerned because you're like, okay, well, you're a doctor. You live with these kids. I mean, I'm sure it's not that big of a deal that you signed off on their physicals, right?
I mean.
But anyways, that comes into play a little later. So just keep that in your back pocket. Then, all the kids arrive at camp. There's this classic scene. Actually reminds me a lot of, what were you going to say, Allie?
I have so many notes on this. I just thought, like,
it reminds me of The Parent Trap.
Oh, okay. I was going a different direction, but yes, that too. But it reminds me of Wet Hot American Summer.
Yes.
Yeah.
When they're, like, getting off the bus.
And they're all running.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you went to summer. Did you go to summer camp?
No, I used to go to, like, day camps, which were very, very fun.
Okay.
But never, like, sleepaway camps.
I never went to, like, I never went to a sleepaway camp either. And I guess from watching all these horror films, thank you, Mom and Dad.
Yeah.
But
seriously, lots could happen.
But it kind of gave me some, like, nostalgia of, like, oh, this looks so fun.
Mm-hmm. It's like, to be a kid again on summer break where you have literally no responsibilities and you just can go away for the summer, meet people from probably across the country and do fun things like fencing and swimming and killing people.
Oh, okay. So half of that was Parent Trap and half of it was Sleepaway Camp.
I know. Can you tell I'm having some influence here? But there is one thing, I want to say it's arguably the first really big problematic thing and theme that we see in this film is they cut to a shot of the kitchen staff standing outside of, you know, what I'm guessing is like the mess hall. And they are, they're looking at all of the kids, you know, and, you know, you would think that this is supposed to be a sweet moment where they're like waving everyone in, welcoming them to camp. And they start to say some really problematic lines, very pedophilic vibes. Had Chef Artie makes a couple of weird comments about calling them baldies. And Allie, I know you wrote down a couple of other quotes that were really disturbing. If
you're like triggered by this stuff, I'm sorry, but we're just recapping the film.
Yeah.
But he says, look at that young, fresh chicken. And the next line, it's not funny, but ain't no thing as being too young. I'm like, gross, but also Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused.
Oh,
yeah.
I love Matthew, so I'm not going to get into that right now.
Me either, but we also love, you know, Sam Rockwell.
Yeah. It wouldn't be a podcast episode if we didn't.
Yeah, if we didn't bring up Sam Rockwell.
So yeah, that kind of is the first like problematic area. And I immediately was like, I hope all of these guys die in this film because like absolutely no thank you. But you know, moving on, we then see Ricky and Angela. They are, you know, making their way into the camp, and Ricky's friend Paul is introduced, you know, as a new character in the film, and he runs into his friend Ricky and he meets Angela. Angela also, I should point out, is a very, very quiet character. I think I mentioned a little earlier in the podcast, but she doesn't even have her first line until 31 minutes into the film. So she does not speak. She's very timid. You can tell she's super shy. She really like has her head down a lot, crosses her arms, definitely giving those like classic body language signs of like, I'm very uncomfortable and I'm very introverted. Then they see the classic bad girl, Judy.
Judy. Well, Judy. I have a thought on Judy. Judy looks like she's like 10 years older than Angela.
Because she likely is. Actually, Angela in this film was only 13, where at this time, they tend to hire people that look a lot older and that are the age of consenting adults at 18 because it's easier to have them work on a more crazy schedule. Sure. And then also, too, they just look a little bit more grown up. It's like a theatrical thing. I feel like that's something that happens a lot in movies and all of that stuff.
I just felt it was so weird that Judy and Angela were supposed to be seemingly the same age. Oh, they do not look.
Totally. And then they also make a point, Ricky also makes a point that he tells Angela that they were steadies last summer, him and Judy. So he's kind of expecting them to like pick up on their romantic steam again, which is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Then we meet Meg and Susie, who are the head counselors for Angela's cabin. I also want to point out here that throughout this entire film, it's very, very ambiguous. Like, who are the actual campers?
Oh, so that I put a note on that too. I'm
so
like,
weird.
Who are the campers? Who are the counselors? I'm so confused.
I literally have no idea. Like and they make it, there's like very young children that seem to be like between kindergarten and 5th grade. And then there's like older kids who I actually thought in one of the scenes were counselors. And then I just find out that they're just older campers, which was interesting.
Younger looking humans that are counselors. And I'm like, what?
It makes kind of no sense at all.
Let's get a camp uniform, huh?
Yeah. Can we have like some sort of differentiator just to make it a little bit
distinguish
obvious
stuff.
Yeah. Very interesting. And then we also see Mel, who is the camp director. He's also welcoming all the kids in. And right off the bat, I get really weird vibes from Mel and Meg, who is one of the girl counselors. And I say girl because she's not a woman. She is
a girl.
She's probably 16 to 19 years old, I would say, probably in this. And either way, that is a big issue because Mel is easily in his 60s, not his 70s. And they kind of make some weird communication. Like, it's just, I'm already just getting weird vibes, like right off the bat.
Again, this is a very problematic film, but it was in the 80s.
It was in the 80s.
Not that that's an excuse, but
totally,
we're addressing all of those things.
Yep. Then we get to the part where they are having lunch all together. I think for like, it's probably like some sort of like welcome lunch or welcome dinner for the first time. And they are all in the mess hall. Meg, she's having some concerns with why Angela is not eating. And so one of the older... Actually, he's probably like the angel in the film, I would say, Ronnie. He's really? Like the only one.
Different
Really? I feel like he's just like the only one that didn't really do anything bad. I feel like, and he was the only one that would really stick up for Angela.
You could be right. In this initial shot that we're going into right now, Meg was bullying Angela for not eating because, you know, she's, like we've addressed, she doesn't want to eat or socialize or be a part of. She
doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, she does not want to be there. So Meg was bullying her, and then Ronnie takes her into the mess hall kitchen where all this creepy staff is. Let's see what you want in this kitchen. Is there anything we can feed you that you actually want to eat? And then it gets fucking creepy.
Yeah. And I guess I will agree with you there that Ronnie could be a little less like blind. Like he should know, like, you should not be leaving this child in the kitchen with the creepy cooks.
Yeah. Just he's like dragging her in there. Also, his shorts are very tight.
That's actually something in the film. And I read a lot of articles about this too as well. That is something in the film that is very, very interesting because they have so many male characters throughout this entire film who are wearing the shortest of shorts, crop tops.
I was
like, and I know that this was definitely a fashion trend at that time, like definitely in the 80s. This was a thing. It's even coming back now. It's popular sometimes in football. Like men will kind of wear like the crop tops when they're practicing, what have you. You know, it's just very interesting that the men are very sexualized a bit in this film. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Although we're born in the 90s. So like we did not grow up knowing that fashion at the time.
Yep.
But we noticed that looking back at these films is the men were very sexualized as well as the women.
Yep.
So
totally.
I noticed that fashion, but Ronnie's shorts were tight.
They were so tight.
In that kitchen. And then going back to the kitchen.
Yep. And then I want to say, you know, at this point, just like Ali had mentioned, we're in the kitchen. It is not a good place for any young girl or any young child for that matter to be. And Ronnie leaves Angela with the top chef, Chef Artie, to, you know, quote unquote, get something to eat. And he immediately brings her into the pantry closet and says, you know, something along the lines of like, I've got something in here, you know, that you're really going to like, yada, yada. And he starts unbuttoning his pants.
Yes. Very problematic. He was suggesting that what she would like to eat was, you know, somewhere. Yeah.
Wiener. Yeah. No, thank you.
So that made me uncomfortable for sure.
Very uncomfortable and almost made me want to shut off the film. Not going to lie, because it's just, and I think that's also the point of this film is to make you very uncomfortable and like for these weird things to just, it makes you hate the person. Like you hate Artie, the chef, more than anything. And you like hope that he's going to get killed at some point. And then Ricky actually goes to find her. I will say one thing about Ricky this entire film is he is such a good cousin. I feel like he is always helping Angela out of situations and he's always helping her and he always sticks up for her when she's getting bullied and he never complains about it ever. Like, if anything, he is just a diehard, like, this is my cousin.
Ride or
you guys
die.
are not going to, like, he doesn't ever let it affect him. He's not like, oh my God, this again. Like, he's always, like, got her back. So, anyways, he finds her in the pantry with Artie right before something is about to happen. And Artie freaks out, throws Ricky up against one of the shelves and is like, you better not say anything. The next scene that we have is, I'm assuming this is after lunch. All the kids have left and Artie and Ben, one of the other head cooks, they're getting ready, you know, to make probably their next big meal, whether that's dinner or breakfast. And Artie has a huge pot. And I mean, think of a pot that's like maybe a normal diameter of like a large pot, but it is tall.
It's a water heater size.
Yeah, it's literally the size. That's a great visual comparison. It is like the size of a water heater. It's also weirdly high, which I understand, you know, if you think about like a natural stove top and then having like the size of a water heater pot boiling, it's going to be tall, but it's so tall that you can't even really get to it easily. And so he has to get up onto a chair that Ben is sitting in, and he has to get on top of that chair in order just to check on the water to see if it's boiling.
Makes basically zero sense.
No sense. It's very weird. It's very, I would say, very poor kitchen practices.
I think there's a lot of poor kitchen practice because
I agree.
Beyond the water heater sized boiling pot of water, there are like fly sticks everywhere.
Yeah.
Like fly tape. And then also I saw some cockroaches. Also, is this a real camp? You said it's a real camp because I'm like.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like, if all of the interiors are also like part of the actual real camp, but this is like Camp Arawak is a real camp.
They made a gross, so good job.
Yeah.
But so Artie's boiling all this corn. I love corn. I love corn. I love corn.
I didn't have corn.
But he also adds all the sodium. So like watch your cholesterol, bro.
Please watch it.
Please. So while he's boiling this corn and it's a first person view of a killer coming in, and we get to see Artie's reaction and say, "What are you doing, kid?" That's a first little indicator of, oh, it's a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's a little context clue right there. And then the rest of that scene is pretty unbearable in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal. Artie gets pushed into the vat of boiling water and it falls. He falls and it spills on top of him.
I didn't take physics, but everything in this scene didn't make a lot of sense.
I agree. And I will say that the makeup and the special effects for this scene, though, were, I feel like, top tier. Because if I could imagine what someone's like skin actively boiling looks like, it would probably be very close to this. And so I was hence very impressed. Oh, Allie's showing me a note that she had.
I had the exact same note. Is not gonna lie, it's like basically besides the father dying in the beginning in the lake, makeup effects are on point.
Yeah. Did you notice that on his face you can actively see it bubbling up?
Bubbling, yes.
Yeah. I actually read that the way that they did that was with some gelatin and then injecting air into like air pockets within the gelatin.
It makes sense.
It's just so crazy how creative people can be. And especially imagine visual effects back then.
Totally.
They did not have computers to make this look good. They truly had to practice until it sort of looked at least a little bit convincing, which is very impressive.
Props to that team.
Very, very much giving those guys a lot of props.
For sure.
You know, we see Artie and he is totally just burned to shreds all over himself. We don't see his entire body necessarily, but we definitely see like his hands, arms, face. He is not doing well. He gets taken away by the ambulance and the camp owner, Mel, has a discussion with some of the kitchen staff and is trying to say, hey guys, you know, I really want to keep this hush hush. And he has a quote, no need to upset the campers. So he's really not trying to cause any type of scene here. And he actually goes on to ask the kitchen staff to also not say anything in exchange for a raise in pay.
So funny thing about the hush hush money is the kitchen staff that like were witness to it, Mel, the camp director, said, you know, a raise for you. You're in charge now. A raise for all of you. XYZ. Ben, who's in charge now, is actually James Earl Jones's father. So Darth Vader's father, you know?
Wait, I did not know that at all.
Yeah. Isn't that pretty crazy?
Wait, that's actually wild.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
And I kind of like felt for him because he seemed like a nice man. He just didn't know what to do.
He does. Yeah.
But, you know, like father, like son.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. So then we get to our next scene, which is a bunch of the male campers, counselors. We've already talked about how ambiguous it is. We don't freaking know who is who, but we see all of them and they're playing baseball together and they are talking so much shit. And I will say something that is great about this film is I feel like they really do at times portray how real kids talk to each other. Because real kids that are this age, especially like young boys that are roughhousing or playing sports, I feel like this is what they do is they talk shit to each other. And it doesn't get portrayed in a lot of films. And I'm really glad that it sort of has that real feeling in this because they are definitely not letting anything slide. There's a lot of cursing in this film. Even Ricky, one of our main characters, he is sort of known for having a big potty mouth.
I just thought this scene was so interesting because kind of what's the point?
There really wasn't a point.
Yes, I think the point was to show masculinity and to really confuse us, the viewers, of who is who because we've got some like 13-year-olds, we've got some 30-year-olds.
I thought it was campers versus counselors.
That's what I thought too, but it's not.
No, it's not because there are indications later that we were not right.
Yeah. So listeners, this scene is not important.
Yeah.
If you really need a time saver.
Yeah, you could skip ahead and
skip right on.
Won't miss any of the important stuff.
But what I will reiterate as what Emma said is, you know, crop tops and real short shorts.
Yep. So if you like that, this is
it's
a good
scene for
that.
you.
Then we get to a scene where some of the older boys, again, I don't know if they're camp counselors or campers. I'm going to assume campers. They are asking Angela about going to the lake. So they're in like a gymnasium of sorts, and Angela is sitting by herself on some benches, and they're like, Angela, let's go to the lake, you know? And they're definitely bullying her because she's not taking any of their shit and not talking back to them or telling them yes or no. She's just ignoring them.
Well, she's not just ignoring them. She wins Best Actress for not blinking ever. She's staring at them.
She has a hardcore stare.
Yeah.
Yep. She's just staring at them like, get the hell out of here, you guys. And the two guys that are kind of pestering her are Mike and Kenny. And they were dared by some of the other older boys to go up to her and ask her like to go to the lake and let's go swimming and this and that. So keep that in the back of your heads. And then Ricky, again, sweet cousin, comes to her rescue and is like, starts to kind of fight them, actually. I think someone says to him, oh, don't fight them, Ricky. Mel's here, like the camp director. He's like, I don't give a shit. Like, and he just starts like fighting them. He's like, they're like making fun of my cousin. They're bullying her. Like, no, that's not okay.
Dude, Ricky's a tough guy.
Yep. So, you know, they end up leaving her alone. It gets diffused, what have you. But then at the same time, Paul, who is Ricky's friend, he actually comes over and sits next to Angela and befriends her. And this is actually a very pivotal moment in the film because this is the very first time that we hear Angela speak. And she's so cute. We hear Paul says, "Good night, Angela." And then we hear her say,
"We can't tell you because it's one of the trivia questions."
But you can guess what she says back. So then our next scene is we have some of the older, again, we don't know, freaking campers, counselors, whoever they are, people at the camp.
Like the age difference. It's like,
so weird.
It's crazy.
They try to get some of the girls of their similar age to swim in the lake at night. And it's almost like boys against girls. And they're, you know, trying to convince them like, let's like, you know, go skinny. They don't say skinny dipping, but I think it's implied that they want to go skinny dipping or at least down in their skivvies, right? We see Kenny, who is our man that was kind of pestering Angela a little earlier and trying to ask her to go to the lake. He takes a gal named Leslie on a rowboat, and he takes her there with a specific plan to kind of prank her and ends up tipping the rowboat. She gets very upset about this and storms off, and then it ends with just Kenny, and he is underneath the rowboat, and he's you know, like in Pirates of the Caribbean when like he's
Orlando
under
yeah
they're like under, is it the turtle shell, right? Isn't that what it is?
No, it's like a canoe or something. Like
it is a boat. It is like some sort of vessel.
Yeah.
He is under like some sort of a boat and has a little bit of air.
Is that like a factual?
No, I think that's a real thing. Yeah, that's 100% a real thing.
Well, I feel dumb. But.
Yeah, and he sees another person now at the bottom of the boat with him coming up for air as well. And we only see a shot of the back of their head, and they're brunette. They kind of make, you know, a little bit of a comment of like, oh, what are you doing here?
Yeah. And I made a note. He doesn't refer as a he or she. So we don't know
who it is. Yeah.
What direction.
We just know that they're brunette.
I also called him Blue Oyster Cult Man because he's wearing a
yes.
And I want that t-shirt.
I love BOC.
Me too.
Shout out to my parents too, because we love BOC. And then he actually gets drowned by that second person that ends up in the boat. He gets his head taken down, much like we probably all have when we're swimming as kids and we kind of dunk our friend. He does not come back up.
I have a couple notes on this scene too, like R.I.P. Kenny, the character.
Yeah, you were douchey and a bully, but like no.
But can we have your shirt?
But yeah, can I have that?
But like going back to the counselors who all got like in their nudity, just seems like a huge HR violation.
Yeah. So then we get into the next morning, and the lifeguard is out at the lake, and he's making his rounds, you know, checking on things, and he's really pissed off because the kids have made an absolute mess of the lake area. All of the chairs are in the water, everything's flipped over, and he finds the flipped over rowboat and ends up finding Kenny's body. And he is clearly dead, and a little tiny little snake comes out of his mouth.
And again, props to like the visual effects, like the makeup effects.
They are so, I can't even handle it. They are so good. For a 1983 film, y'all crushed it. And I prefer old effects like this versus the new kind that are all digitized.
I agree.
Personally.
I thought they really killed it.
I could make an entire podcast just about effects and Jurassic Park, and that entire franchise would be a big part of it. But anyways, I'll digress.
Yes.
For another time. Then they have, another person that has been, injured/killed. It's almost like, okay, there's something weird going on, but they haven't quite grasped that there's a pattern yet.
Or put it together.
Yeah, that there's a pattern.
Also, I wanted to mention regarding Kenny's death, the camp director, Mel, said, now I have the burden of telling the child's parents.
It's like, oh, I'm so sorry you have to do that.
Well, also, should the police be doing that?
I know, but, you have to think the parents are going to come after him, though, and be like, how did this happen? What happened? I mean, a lot of responsibility definitely goes on Mel's shoulders, which is a big part of this film in general, I feel like, is Mel, some thoughts later on in the film of who he thinks the person is that's, committing all of these terrible events. But yeah, I see where your point's going. Shouldn't that be more the police? It definitely should.
80s,
80s. Just 80s, Then we get to a point where Paul asks Angela to go see a movie in the rec hall. And so it's pretty sweet between the two of them because, Angela does not talk much, but she will say a few words to Paul and she's starting to get a little comfortable with him. I think she's, kind of developing a little bit of a crush on him and asks her to go see a movie in the rec hall. And she kind of makes a little bit of a joke, aren't we all supposed to watch a movie in the rec hall? And he's like, yeah, but do you want to go together? So they kind of make plans to do that.
This is a little bit of foreshadowing. I don't know. Yeah. So
yes,
definitely. Take that into consideration.
There's definitely going to be a lot going on with the dynamic between Paul and Angela throughout this film. I have another note under here, actually, that Judy actually gets jealous during this scene because the scene actually takes place. They're all playing volleyball outside, but Angela's sitting out. I'm guessing that she's sitting out because she sits out of every physical activity. It's probably something that's on her physical note that her Aunt Martha had made for her.
My girl.
And Judy gets really upset and asks why Angela's not playing volleyball. And then Meg, her camp counselor and the person that's in charge of her bunk. Yeah, this freaking bitch yells at her about talking to boys. They both are just kind of like, why is she allowed to talk to boys? But she doesn't have to play volleyball. It's just very stupid, right? I want to shout out to your mom too, because your mom did tell us the actress that plays Meg, Catherine Kamhi, she actually went on to star in several soap operas
yes,
that your mom has watched. And she was like, wow, I knew that girl from somewhere.
Shout out to my parents who watched this before even I did.
So then fast forward and they have watched the movie in rec hall later that night, and Paul and Angela walk back to her bunk and he asks if, he can walk her back, and she's kind of like, okay, sure. And instead of taking her directly to her bunk, he takes her kind of, I think, behind it or somewhere kind of out of the way where they're not seen by anyone. He just goes in and kisses her. And you can tell that it makes her a bit uncomfortable. And then he asks if he can kiss her again. And without really getting her consent, he sort of just goes in for a second kiss. And she's definitely uncomfortable. She is sort of just like, no, I'm good. I gotta go. It's fine, blah, blah, blah. So then after Angela goes back to her bunk, Judy is also walking up kind of as Paul is leaving the area. And Judy tries to kind of make a little bit of a remark to Paul, kind of tries to seduce him a little bit, if you will. And he's not going for it. He's like, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. And then we have a scene. There is a young man who gets bullied several times throughout the film, and they call him Mozart. I don't know.
That might be his name.
It might be his name. It might be part of his name, like a last name or something. And he's, a sweet kid, a kid with glasses. So they call him Four Eyes.
And they kind of bully him for being, quote unquote, a bigger kid. And he's really not.
No, he's not. But they definitely make a point, in the film, to make his clothes look like they're fitting very tightly and all of these things. And so they decide to prank him. He is falling asleep and they're doing the classic, shaving cream in the hand, itching his nose. And then his hand comes up to kind of, smack his own face with a handful of shaving cream. And he pulls a 180 and pulls out a knife
from his trundle thing.
From his trundle area, and is kind of going after the boys. Doesn't do anything, but is sort of just threatening them. And I feel like they added that in there because they also want to make a note that someone else aside from Angela is being bullied, and that there might be something happening as a result of all the bullying going on.
They're trying to make an effort to throw us off, but obviously it did not work.
Yep. Yep. Then Ronnie, he breaks up the fight and, you know, he's taking it very seriously that the child named Mozart has a knife and Ricky's trying to stick up for him like, hey, you know, he was just joking, what have you. So then that scene kind of dies off. And then we get into another scene where they are at the lake and Angela, again, is sitting out from the physical activity. She is not swimming in the lake. And she's like sitting on some benches and Paul comes over to her and, you know, he's just talking to her. They're, you know, doing their little lovebird thing. And actually in that moment, Judy actually comes over and calls them lovebirds. Then we see Meg come up to Angela after Paul has left and she gives her an earful asking her why she's not swimming, why she doesn't talk to her, why she never answers her. And she is just yelling at this poor child. And Ronnie, one of the higher up, I would say camp counselors, maybe like the head camp counselor, comes over and has to intervene. And it's very traumatic. She's just like yelling at Angela and it's like you feel very, very bad for her. And again, it's just another incident of, you know, this poor girl's at camp and just having like a terrible time. Then we cut to a scene in the girls' cabin where Judy is getting out of the shower at the bunk and she throws a pillow at Angela for getting Meg in trouble. She's like, oh, you didn't have to get Meg in trouble. Throws a pillow at her. And then she calls out for the first time in the film something that some of you may have already been wondering, but she asks Angela why Angela doesn't shower with the rest of the crew.
Oof. Yeah. So they comment a couple things that are extremely problematic and they say, are you queer? Which is obviously not okay these days. And then they also say, like, have you not had your period yet? Which is also not okay. But it also gave reference to Carrie, I think, you know, when they... Yep. When Carrie, you know,
gets shamed for having her period.
Her menstruation. Yeah. So, you know, plug it up. Like Stephen King.
Yep.
So I think that was a reference to that, but it was extremely problematic and traumatizing for Angela in that time, but foreshadowing for other things.
For what's to come. Mm-hmm. And you do get you're sort of asking yourself as the person watching the film. I know the producer and I, when we watched it, we were kind of like, okay, Judy is straight up just like, what, are you queer or something? And it's like, okay, why is she asking her that? Why is she asking her about her body or her period? That's nobody's business at all. And then you're also simultaneously kind of thinking, well, you know, she's definitely into Paul. So it's like, she's probably not, you know, into girls. But, you know, again, we don't know at all at this point, but it definitely starts to garner a couple of questions in your mind. You're sort of looking back at what you've seen so far in the film and then starting to sort of ask yourself, oh, is there a weird reason why maybe Angela isn't showering with the rest of them? Next, we have Angela decides then that she wants to go and just see her cousin Ricky. She tells Susie, the actual nice camp counselor that's assigned to her bunk. She says, hey, I'm going to go see Ricky. I will be back before dinner. As she's on her way to Ricky's bunk, there are a bunch of older boys that are on the roof and they have water balloons and they chuck one right at Angela's chest and it kind of takes her down a little bit. In my opinion, getting hit with a water balloon is really not that traumatic, but they definitely make it a big deal in the film. And
I mean,
Ricky kind of comes to her defense and then he starts yelling some profanities at the kids on the roof.
Yeah.
But I love him. Ricky might be my favorite character.
I mean,
he's so funny. He is diehard for his cousin and I appreciate that. He is like close to his family.
I agree. I'm just like, holy crap. Like you are extremely diehard.
Yeah.
You'd think it was like her mother.
I know. I agree. It's pretty great. I love it. Then Mel actually comes along and is like, Angela, are you okay? He kind of yells at the boys too. And he's like, hey, all of you guys, I think he punishes them by not letting them go to like the mess hall that night or some kind of social that they maybe have.
There's like a social.
Yeah, after dinner. And he also punishes Ricky. He's like, hey, Ricky, you're foul mouth. Like you can't go either. And, you know, scene kind of ends there and they kind of walk Angela off. And then immediately afterwards, and I don't know this actor's name. I was trying to figure out what his character's name was in the film. But he is one of the older boys. They have a shot of him going on a run with a bunch of the other kids. And he comes back into his bunk and he basically tells the other guys that he has to take a massive shit, but that he'll meet them wherever they're going next. And so
I also did not capture his name into whoever that actor is.
I couldn't figure it out.
I'm really sorry because all I know you is big shit guy.
Big shit B guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so essentially he has to take a shit and I can't imagine going to have to do that in a camp bathroom.
In a camp, yeah.
That must be so uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. So to his benefit, it kind of clears out because all the guys are going on to do what they're doing. And they're like, okay, bro, like just meet us after you take a big fat shit. You know, it's fine. And he goes into the bathrooms and he's by himself.
So you know what was interesting to me about this is he's taking a shit, minding his own business.
In a stall, yeah.
It's in a stall, yes. And they, meaning the killer, somehow shoves like a rod between,
I know. I'm like,
the door latch. But then immediately after that, they go behind and tear the screen open.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine
So
this.
How are they in both places at?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Just too fast. 80s movie. It's okay.
So yeah, you see there's a pole going through the latches of the bathroom stalls.
Yep. And then they go around to the exterior and slit the screen.
With a knife. In an X pattern.
And then put a beehive into the stall. A, is he allergic to bees? Is this why they did this? B, couldn't you climb under the stall? Isn't that kind of like...
I would try to get out of there as much as over, under, any possible way.
Well, yeah, but I'm just like, he did.
So I agree with you. There should be a way.
Young Pooh Man did not try any of those things. Young Pooh. It's a good name.
No, he didn't. And we also don't know. It's a lot of these killings are a little bit ambiguous too. Like even Kenny, like when he pops up in the water, he's all bloody and bashed, but we don't see that in the scene. Like we just assume that he drowned. And then even with this young Pooh, assume that he's obviously stung by like dozens, if not hundreds of bees. And maybe he is allergic and maybe it just has like a really bad reaction. But I agree, Ellie, if I had that same situation, I would do my best to try to get out of there as fast as possible. I think back to the producer and I actually rewatched a lot of Jackass seasons recently. And they do a lot of stuff with bees. And some of them will just climb anything and everything because your adrenaline is just pumping and you're like, get me the hell out of here. I do find that kind of interesting as well.
Well, and how fast they attach to his face or like his body. I'm like, how?
Yes.
Did somebody drip honey on his face?
Totally.
People couldn't survive bee stings. Also, again, I will say the effects they did, like his makeup, solid.
I was just going to say the same exact thing. There's a great shot of after this all takes place, a bloody arm where the bees are literally burrowing themselves into holes into his arm. And then his head is covered in bees. And it is a fantastic shot and use of visual effects.
Also, I took note that he didn't have time to wipe. So like that sucks.
Oh, he's shitty.
Yeah. I mean, in several different ways.
I would not want to go that way.
I know.
Like, I don't want to be embarrassed.
I mean, I think that's the last of his worries. But like, I was just like, oh, that sucks.
That does suck. Young Pooh is shitty. That's sad.
So post poor Pooh Man's death.
Or,
Pooh Bee Man.
PBD.
Yes. We get some interesting commentary from Mel, the camp director, and Ronnie, the, seemingly hunky camp
Angel
counselor.
Man.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with the Angel Man statement, but whatever.
That's good. I like an opposing opinion.
I love you.
Oh my God. I love you.
But so Mel, the director, says, how many are left? And he's talking about the campers.
Because there's been so much shit going on to this point.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me because obviously he knows. And then Ronnie just suggests, let's consolidate the bunks so it looks less conspicuous. Like it looks like...
And probably just for like a safety reason too. Like,
Sure. Optics.
Like bigger groups. Yeah, optics.
But basically they're giving zero fucks and they're just taking this extremely casually.
Yeah.
And then we move on to a different kind of scene.
But I do want to say before that, Mel, I think, is starting to think that it may be Ricky. And he has like some weird reasoning of why he thinks like the killer might be Ricky. He just thinks that, Ricky's like just like a little shit. And Ricky, is going after people that have bullied Angela. And he has some weird sort of like vendetta of why he's thinking that it's Ricky. So that will come to fruition a little bit later. But Allie, I'll let you continue with the next scene.
So it's just interesting because it seems like some different characters have different information. So going into that, our next scene is we've got Angela and Loverboy is what I call him. His name is what? Paul?
Loverboy Paul.
Paul. LBP, Loverboy Paul. Mm-hmm. It's like John Paul Jones from The Bachelor or whatever.
Oh, God.
Angela is snuck up on by Loverboy Paul. LBP. And she says, oh my gosh, I thought you were the killer. I'm like, how does she know there's a killer?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because they've definitely been trying to keep it under wraps. But for the sake of devil's advocate, there's probably been a lot of gossip of like, okay, well, where are these humans that are no longer with us?
Also, just
what happened to them?
Noticing that people are not there?
Exactly. Yeah. Like what happened to them? There has to have been someone that, we didn't find out with the last death who exactly it was that discovered the body, but someone must have discovered it, whether it was a camper or a counselor, and word spreads probably like wildfire. So.
But directly after Angela says, I thought you were the killer, Loverboy Paul was like, let's go to the lake. She's like, yeah.
Immediately. She's like, oh, yeah, even if you're the killer, whatever, I trust you with my life down by water that I don't like to get into.
Yeah, exactly. Love that for us.
Love that. Love that.
And then we get into some weird shit. Take it away.
So there's a little bit of playfulness going on down by the lake. It's a very interesting time in this film because there's a lot going on, again, on the counselor front. They are dealing with multiple deaths now at this point and are trying to consolidate campers and trying to get their shit together. And then now we have Angela and Paul, who I feel like in the film you are rooting for. They really try to set it up as the couple that you're rooting for. You want Angela to have love because she's so bullied, and Paul is one of the few folks that are nice to her. So you want this all to pan out positively. And they're down at the beach and they start kissing. And they're kind of rolling in the sand. They're playing around. She's like running away from him, what have you. They fall onto the sand, the classic, him on top of her, and he's kissing her, and he starts to put his hands slowly down towards her chest, and she kind of signals to him to stop. At this point, he is, getting ready to open her shirt, and we have a flashback that I'll let Allie kind of get into.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Emma.
You're welcome.
So the flashback is kind of, I would say a couple things. Progressive for its time.
Very progressive for its time.
For 83. And then also confusing because they don't speak about any of it again in this film.
It's just a flashback.
Yeah. So while Loverboy and Angela are laying in the sand, Angela gets a flashback of her two dads in bed together. And obviously one of them is killed in the boat accident at the very top of the film.
And something to point out at that, actually, if you go back to that scene in the film where the boat crashes and runs over the dad, there is another man on the dock, but you just don't know it at the time. And he screams out, John!
Yeah.
When the dad gets run over.
So it's completely like at the top of the film, it's why would you know that? And then if you really look into
Think about the details.
Yeah. Then you see them in bed together, and then it shoots to a scene of...
And I also, sorry, Allie, really quick, I want to point out that the two young kids, so Angela, when she's a child, and her brother, Peter, are both peeking at the corner, seeing their dad in bed.
Yes, and they're
kind of giggling about it. Like, they're like...
Yeah, they're having a laugh about it, like, oh my gosh.
And their dads don't know that they have caught them, essentially, like, in bed together.
But then it goes to a stranger place of... Angela and Peter, again, those are the siblings that were at the...
That we've gathered at this point. Yeah.
They were at the lake at the beginning. And they are kind of having a weird, flowers in the attic moment. Just kind of exploring, Blue Lagoon kind of situation.
Yeah. And the scene is of them both sitting on a bed. The camera is revolving around them in a circle. They are looking at each other, facing each other, just sitting on a bed with a good amount of distance between the two. But Peter is pointing at Angela. Mm-hmm. And with each rotation.
It's funny because Emma was like, yeah, they're just pointing at each other.
I was so innocent. I was like, yeah, I don't know why Peter's just pointing at Angela. And then literally Allie and the producer were both like, hello.
So the context is it's pointing to incestual
themes.
Themes. Yeah. So at least producer has my back because we both got that little context clue.
He's like, do I want to have her back on this issue though?
Love your little, blessed heart over there, Emma. But yeah, so it's a weird flashback that has these two fathers and brother and sister. So it's just weird. And then again, they never reference it again.
It's a weird, just he's pointing at Angela and he's kind of pointing with each
Emma,
rotation,
he's not pointing at her. He's trying to unbutton her blouse.
No, he is. But it's like his finger is getting closer and closer to her blouse. Yeah. Like
context clues.
No, I got it. I was just
ET phone home? I don't think
the
so.
producer's like, Emma, get it together. But with each rotation, though, he is getting closer and closer to her, to the top of her bed dress, her sleep dress. What am I trying? Her PJs. Jesus Christ. And yes, nightgown? It, like, as I've watched it now over again, I 100% can see, because on the beach when she's kissing Loverboy, he's starting to undo
do the same thing.
Her shirt. Yeah. Exactly. In the exact same way. So they don't show anything, but they definitely allude to it in that scene. And then that's it. Flashback over, and Angela runs away from Paul. She's like, I gotta go. And she just runs. She's like, no, and leaves.
So it's interesting. Half of that scene doesn't come up again, but half of it does kind of matter.
Yeah.
Towards the end. So keep that in mind as you're watching it, or as you have watched it, and kind of think about it again.
Yeah, definitely. Then we get to like a daytime scene where now the campers are all trying to play a game together. They have, one of the counselors has kind of acknowledged that there are less campers now, and that some of their daily activities have been chopped a little bit just due to all the things that are going on at the camp, which is crazy to me, because nowadays, if all of this was going on, would you not be telling the parents immediately what was happening? And then I'm sure multiple families would be pulling their kids out of the camp. Like, there wouldn't be enough kids to even have like a revised version of the schedule. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like nowadays that just like would not fly. There's a lot of things in this film that would not fly today.
100%. Also, social media didn't happen.
No,
back then.
Yeah,
and like
totally.
email.
Yeah, that's true.
Direct contact with phones.
They were probably sending pigeons at this time. I don't even know what was happening. Or owls.
Yeah.
Or donkeys.
Squirrels.
Yeah. Dogs.
Yeah. Nothing.
Rats. Nothing.
Caterpillars.
So then, again, we're in this daytime scene, and they're trying to resume some sort of normalcy with some regular activities. And they decide to play sort of like a capture the flag type of game. And Angela, as we've all known through this entire film, is not partaking in any sort of physical activities. But Ricky tries to kind of bring her into an idea that he has. He's like, hey, Angela, we're going to go around the back in the woods, and I'm going to position you to where basically you're close to like where we could score a goal, or I don't know, capture someone's flag or whatever. And
I never played that.
I was like, I have vague memories of it, but like, I'm going to position you so perfectly that we will win. And then this game will be over before we know it. And then we can all just like go back to our bunks. So like, it benefits her too. Cause if she can just help him like essentially score, you know, they can all go back to their bunks and it's all over.
What? Sorry.
Score a flag.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
And so they both go into the woods, and I think at some point they break off. Unfortunately, they both witness, but from different angles in the forest, they witness Paul and Judy making out in the woods.
And it's
heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. If you were ever, I mean, we've all been 13 or whatever.
Whatever age these people are. Yeah, because it's, again, we don't know. Oh, God. It literally just broke my little heart for Angela. Like, seeing Paul, like, it's like, Paul really couldn't get what you wanted, but couldn't be patient.
All right, well, maybe he gets his comeuppance.
Maybe he does get his comeuppance. If you don't know, that's our new favorite word based on the synopsis is comeuppance.
It's the word of the day.
Word of the day. Ricky and Angela both see, which is almost like a double whammy for both of them, because there are multiple areas here that are interesting, because Paul is really good friends with Ricky. Ricky had, quote unquote, he was steadies with Judy the previous summer. Judy is a bully to Angela. And then Angela also was, you know, essentially like with Paul, with Loverboy. So there are multiple aspects here that are messed up on all angles between Paul and Judy, and they are the worst.
We have a classic love square right here.
A love square like no other.
Yeah.
With a lot of killing to come.
And like a lot of like fucked up shit.
Yeah, very fucked up. Then later on, there's another lake scene where Angela is again sitting in the bleachers by the lake.
I'm just like, okay, if I don't want to be associated with lake or like camp activities, I'm going to sit in my bunk Why am I sitting in the bleachers?
I wonder if they make her sit there kind of like when you're like in PE. You know what I mean? It's like you can't just go wherever you want. You still have to like sit out.
PE was the worst.
But you have to just like watch the kids do it. I think it's sort of a punishment tactic of like, you could be having more fun if you just fucking participate. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm not participating, but yeah.
I'd rather go read a book, but okay.
So then Paul comes up to Angela on the bleachers. And again, he's done this many a time. And he tries to apologize to her. He's like, hey, I'm really sorry for what happened. And he's like, you know, like I didn't mean to call you that. Because I forgot to mention that Judy actually comes up to her as Paul is talking to her. And says, oh, Paul, like something along the lines of like, did you tell Judy how much you called her a prude? And Angela is just like, oh my God, Paul has completely betrayed me. You know, that's horrible. So again, he's like trying to apologize for all of it. Doesn't go well. Then some big pivotal moment in all of this.
And at the same time, what's crazy is Mel, the camp director, I know I keep calling him that, but just for reference.
Yeah, just so you know. Old man Mel.
Old man Mel. Like.
OMM.
OMM. But he's also on the shore bullying Ricky because he thinks Ricky's the killer.
Yep.
And neglecting the bullying of Angela behind him by his, you know, camp staff / camper.
Yeah, because Meg joins in on the fun.
Yeah.
So not only has Judy now come over and she's making Angela feel bad, calling her or telling her basically that Paul told her that she's a prude, but then Meg comes over and it becomes this whole thing.
Yeah. So I just thought it was wild that Mel just got so fixated on.
And like aggressive.
Yeah. That would not fly these days.
No. And then at the same time, Meg pulls Angela over her shoulder to freaking try to throw her in the lake.
And then she does.
She does.
I'd be so fucking pissed.
No, totally. And poor Ricky, again, trying to be the heroic cousin, is like, oh my God, Angela, you're in the water, you know, and he's trying to get to her, but Mel is like not letting him.
Yeah.
He gets down there finally and gets her out of there and like tries to like, you know, just take her back to the bunk. And it's probably super traumatic for her. Like, not only does she not want to swim, her father died in a boating accident in a lake. That exact lake, actually, if we're being honest. Well, at least it's implied that it's that exact lake. So, like, very traumatic for her.
It's hard for me to be sympathetic knowing what I know now, but you guys will see or hear.
I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. I agree. But in the moment when you're watching this,
I didn't know.
We didn't know what we know now.
Why would you?
Oh, God. Yeah. And something else that I actually didn't notice until the second time I watched this is that as Ricky is getting her out of the lake after she's been thrown in, there are a ton of little kids that are playing in the sand that throw sand at Judy. And that may come into play later. I'll just say. Because I had a question about this and I'm going to bring it up a little bit later, but now it makes so much more sense now that I've seen it again.
I also have one question while we're here.
Answer.
Who decided that summer camps were like the spot to have murder movies happen? That's just like there's no answer really. I'm just like, why did we decide this?
So I did actually read that this film, by the time it came out, there were already several Friday the 13th that had come out. So I'm going to say that probably had a little bit of an influence and part of the inspiration. It's such an innocent place and it's supposed to be, you know.
Or is it because all the counselors are fucking?
True.
Sorry, I just looked at Emma.
I've never been a camp counselor for record.
Nor I.
But no, I think there's always like assumption that, you know, camp counselors are just there to party and hook up and it's just an easy job for them to watch kids during the day.
Yeah, it's just interesting because they focus on the Horty camp counselors and less on the I guess that's interesting is like this they focus on the campers and less on the counselors.
Yep.
There's a little combo of both, like a little spice of both.
But yeah, other like horror films that we see that are like camp based,
it's more on the counselors because like they're the horny teenagers.
Yeah. And they're making lots of bad moral decisions. So hence they should be killed.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So then we see a scene later on where everyone is at like the mess hall or like the area that they hold the socials at. And we have a really creepy scene. And again, I mentioned this at the very beginning of the podcast, but Mel and Meg have weird sexual energy and it really comes into fruition right here. Mel and Meg, I literally have it written in my notes. Mel and Meg make creepy dinner plans.
Yes. So essentially a bunch of the kids and counselors have like a social event that evening. Meg holds back and is like, hey, Mel, like, what are you doing tonight? And he's like, I don't know.
I think Meg's like off for the night. So she's like, oh, yeah. Or how about that dinner?
How about the dinner you offered? Which is problematic in itself.
Yeah,
yes.
Very weird.
And he says, what, like 9 p.m.? Sure. Then we go into the scene where Meg goes into her bunk and the shower's busy in her bunk and she wants to shower for whatever reason. Ew. And then she's like, I got to shower. So she goes into an empty bunk.
Next door, yeah. Like close by.
Yes, close by. And because people are dying, I guess. I don't know. So there's an empty bunk.
Yeah.
And so she's showering in there, doing her thing. And then
while she's in the shower, she gets stabbed by someone, by the killer. And not only do they stab her, but they stick the knife in and then drag it down. As we've alluded to, I think even in our previous episode of I Know What You Did Last Summer, yet another shower scene where it sort of feels like a little bit of an ode to Psycho.
Psycho, yes.
We can definitely see some influences there. I mean, we've all been in like a shower, I feel like, behind the curtain where we're like, is someone going to come and like do something? Because of all of these movies, they have like created this fear in us, you know?
That's exactly what I was going to say too, Emma, is it definitely pays homage to Psycho. However, I'm a little bit critical. The angle at which
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. The angle at which they filmed her being stabbed and like, you know.
Yeah, the way that it's seen from the killer's perspective and her perspective. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Just like, you know, analytical. Just being smart girlies.
And anatomically, it doesn't make sense.
Does not make sense. But not the funny thing. That's not the right word. Our director, Mel, comes in to discover the body, obviously shocked. What I heard him say, and tell me if I'm wrong, is, Mel, that's too bad. But I could be very wrong.
I'm going to go ahead and say, that he probably did say that because he's creepy as hell. And when he finds her body too, he sees that she has been ripped down the back of her spine, which, just like Ali mentioned, does not make sense with how it was portrayed in the actual scene when it was happening.
It should have been like on the side or something.
Should have been her side,
yes.
100%. Like a dress zipper.
Yes.
That's like, you know,
I'm glad we both
caught
side. That.
Yes, I totally caught that as well. But before that happens, actually simultaneously, Eddie, one of the other camp counselors, he gets assigned by Ronnie to take some of the younger campers to sleep under the stars. So just keep that in your minds. That will come into play a little bit later. But he's kind of like, oh, dang it. Like, I'm not off for the night. And I got to take all these like little campers to go basically all sleep outside under the stars.
So basically it's just like a Wet Hot American Summer. But
basically.
But also, something about when Mel discovers Meg's body, and he just like leaves her there. Like, why are we not at this point calling the cops?
Yeah. We don't get much closure on like what happens next with Mel discovering the body until a little bit later, because there's a couple other scenes that happen kind of in tandem. One of them is, you know, after Eddie takes those younger campers to sleep under the stars, another kind of separate scene happens where Paul tries to apologize to Angela again about calling her a prude. He's like, hey, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't mean to say that. You know, you're not a prude. Basically, Judy sucks. Like, let's be together. And Angela says, meet me at the waterfront after the social. Then we go back to the young campers where Eddie has them all camping and they're all asleep. They're all kind of like by a fire. It's a very cozy little cute scene. And a couple of them wake Eddie up and they're like, Eddie, we want to go back. You know, we don't want to sleep out here. We're cold. And Eddie's like, come on, guys, like, let's stick it out. But then a couple of them are asking him to go back. So he's like, you know what? He makes a judgment call to take the campers back that want to go back and then leave the ones that are sleeping because they're peaceful and calm. And again, you're at a freaking summer camp, so you think you're safe. But Eddie should have known, because there have been multiple deaths at this point, that you should not leave very, very young campers by themselves. And that's all I will say on that point for just a second.
Going back to kind of piggybacking off what you said is it's been made reference to Angela knows, she's made commentary that she knows that there's killing going on.
Yeah.
But Ricky does not.
No. Yes, exactly. And actually, before Mel discovers Meg's body, he actually does go looking for Meg in a couple of the different cabins. And he even asks like a few of like the other counselors, like Susie and Ronnie, like, hey, have you guys seen Meg? You know, blah, blah, blah. And so he does his own investigating, and he actually runs into Judy, and Judy is making out with Mike, who is one of the guys actually that teased Angela with Kenny, the other gentleman that we've mentioned several times. Mike hides under the bed, and Judy just acts like she's like reading or something. And Mel's kind of like, oh, why aren't you hanging out at the social? And Judy's like, oh, I'm in for the night, blah, blah, blah. Judy ends up just kicking Mike out. She's over it for the night, and she ends up just kind of getting ready for bed. And this is a huge scene here. It's a little bit of a trigger warning. It's pretty graphic to talk about. You don't actually see this happen, but it's definitely implied and assumed that this is happening. But Judy is curling her hair in her bunk by herself, kind of in the dark. A little bit, actually.
So I made a note of that. I was like, why is everything so dark in
everything
all these
is so
bunks?
Dark, but horror movies, right?
I know.
Whatever. So it's a little dark, and she hears a noise, and she finds a person in the doorway, and they actually show the person in the doorway.
I thought it was Ricky.
I think that's what they want.
That's how he wanted me to see. Yes.
Before I get fully into the scene, I'm going to pour just like a tiny bit more wine because it's a lot.
It's a skosh.
It's a little bit ambiguous as to who it is. It kind of looks like Ricky, kind of looks like several people. And actually, a fun fact that the producer just told me was that it's actually, it actually is a hand model in this film who stood in because some of the younger actors could not work like longer hours. And so he was sort of the person that was stand-in. So you kind of can't really tell who's standing in the doorway. But Judy makes a comment like, oh, what do you want? So it's definitely like someone she knows.
This is a really tough one to go through. They had to cut a lot of this scene because extremely explicit.
Very graphic.
And they cut it down to be more ambiguous and like implied. But essentially, so Judy's curling her hair, quote unquote killer comes in, and I didn't understand. He just like slaps her?
He smacks her, which kind of like temporarily knocks her out.
I was going to say, does that render her unconscious?
I don't think she's fully unconscious, but it sort of like smacks her, and then she's like laying on the bed.
So
with her eyes closed.
Yeah, so Judy's essentially rendered unconscious enough that she gets potentially assaulted with her curling iron. And
we'll leave that to your imagination.
Watch it, and not your imagination, but like,
interpretation.
As a woman, I use a curling iron, so that's like terrifying to me.
And it's just, I wanted to go back to this a little bit once we get to the final part of the film, but it's also in a little bit of a...
It is, yes. It's like a little foreshadowing.
It's a little bit of a foreshadowing of some of the gender issues without this film and sexuality issues without this film. Yes. So we'll get into that a little bit later. And then the very next scene is Eddie coming back to his campers, and they are all slaughtered. I will say you do not see children being slaughtered, which is thank God, because that's very triggering. But you do see, similar to the very, very beginning of the film, where you see kind of like a thrashed life jacket. You don't see the body of a child or anything, but you do see like thrashed, very, just messy sleeping bags.
I will say, I think my eyesight's getting pretty bad. So if your eyesight is bad, then you don't really see that.
Yeah, you don't see much, thank God, because I was very scared to see that scene with like children being hurt. And I'm glad that didn't happen. So then, like Ali said, once we get to the part, Mel has already found Meg's body, and he is like, holy shit, what is happening right now? Now is convinced that it's Ricky that has committed all of these murders, and he is basically out for his blood. Mel is like, Ricky, you have ruined everything. And he goes to confront Ricky again, and he actually attacks Ricky. Mm-hmm. And it's assumed that he's kicked the shit out of Ricky, so much so that Ricky like may not be alive.
While watching this, I knew that was the outcome that they wanted us to see, but poor actor that played Mel did not. It was not convincing.
It was not good. Yeah,
I was
it was not convincing.
He might have like a couple bruises, but the intention was that he was going to die from this beating from Mel.
Yeah. And Mel runs away. He's like, I got to get away, blah, blah, blah. And he runs away and he goes to a target area for archery and he sees who the real killer is. But of course, we as the viewer do not see that.
Also, me not thinking, when you say Target, thinking about
the actual shopping retail center.
Target.
Oh, I love Target. We love Target. Target,
Same.
sponsor us.
Please.
Sponsor us. It's almost Halloween. Anyways, the killer whom Mel sees, and he says something along the lines of like, it's you. They shoot Mel directly in the throat with an arrow.
Not gonna lie, like the effects were not bad.
Effects were on point, and I also
on point, like an arrow.
Oh, literally on point. Yeah, so now Mel's dead.
Yeah.
And a cop has now been dispatched to the area because they just like in general want to find out what's happening because Eddie has called Ronnie and has told him like, hey, the little campers are all gone. They've all been slaughtered and like shit's going down. Call the cops. So then the cop shows up. It's a sheriff and he is trying to help all of the counselors. He's like, hey, make sure you guys go in groups and why don't you guys try to round up like as many of the campers basically as you can. And I also want to point out right here that the sheriff's mustache is so unbelievably fake. It is hilarious. And it's actually a point in this film. Like if you are a diehard Sleepaway Camp lover, you know that this is like something that gets brought up constantly on any article or anything like about this film. It is so fake. And I did read that I guess they did a scene with the sheriff that he was actually in more towards like the beginning of the film. And then this scene in the end, he had done something and actually shaved his mustache. So they had to put a fake one on, but it's so bad.
It literally looks like it's like Sharpie or like
it's
so bad. But like, we love you.
I might post it on our Instagram because it's so bad.
I think so.
And I kind of love it. I kind of like love how bad it is. You know what I mean?
Yes. As a family who comes from loving fake mustaches, like the little sticky ones, I get it.
Yeah, that's basically what they used are the fake sticky ones.
Honestly, before it's time.
So then the counselors break up to gather some of the campers. At this time, also simultaneously, Paul meets up with Angela down at the waterfront because, you know, she said, let's meet at the waterfront after the social.
And it's funny because like all this shit's going down, but let's still meet at the waterfront.
Let's freaking meet at the waterfront.
I guess so. We're like 13 or 14. Hello? Let's go.
And she tells him, let's go swimming.
Which is telling.
Like, he's like, what? Really? Mm-hmm. It's very telling because this whole time she has not gotten in the water once and has been terrified. So honestly, if I was Paul, that should have been a little bit of a red
I was going to say, wait, is Paul like...
Is Paul dumb?
Yeah, is Paul dumb? Like
he is.
Is it his fault?
Mean, but you're young and dumb.
It's
kind of his fault.
No, but like we don't like to victim shame.
We don't like to victim shame. But then after that, you know, Angela is trying to convince Paul to take off his clothes so that they can go swimming. And he's all excited. And then it pans to a different scene. And Ronnie and Susie are teamed up together. And they're trying actually to find Angela and some of the other campers. We actually see another one of the camp counselors. They find Meg's body. They have a very, very visceral reaction. Mm-hmm. And they're like, holy shit. Basically traumatized. You can tell they're like walking out of the cabin where they just totally. This whole thing has become like a slaughter center now, you know?
It's giving American Horror Story. Yeah, 1984.
Yes.
I think it was. Yes.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
Shout out
without
Ryan
a doubt.
Murphy, yeah.
Oh, shout out. Yes. We love you. Then again, it pans back to Ronnie and Susie, and they're trying to find Angela. They find Angela on the beach with her back turned, and she's kind of humming like a little song. And they're like, Angela? Angela, is that you? It's a little dark, a little hard to tell, but they're like, they know it's Angela.
I would say that sorry to interrupt you, Emma.
No, you're good.
I would say that this movie was not scary. This last scene, I was
hella
like,
scary.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with you.
And it kind of probably influenced a lot of films that we see these days. Like, kind of gives me barbarian vibes.
Oh,
like,
absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, continue.
Oh, no, you're good. But at this time, when they discover Angela, but her back's like kind of turned and they're like, dude, are you okay? It's kind of funny that I said dude.
Oh, wow.
Anyways, she has another flashback of her Aunt Martha, and her Aunt Martha is talking to her, but we are only seeing Aunt Martha at the very beginning, and she's, saying like, I'm so happy you're here, yada, yada. And then it pans to a young child who has their entire head kind of wrapped with medical wrap. So we can assume that this is right after the accident that happened with the boat where they lost their father. And this is where we have the most controversy and the most problematic, I would say, themes that have been argued by a lot of people throughout this entire film. And we actually find out in this scene, in this flashback, that Angela, this entire time, is actually her brother, Peter.
Peter, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Aunt Martha, in this flashback, says to Peter repeatedly, her husband left her. She did not want another little boy because she already had Ricky. She wanted a little girl. Mm-hmm. She said, I've always dreamed of a little girl.
So basically, Angela actually died that day in the lake with her dad.
Yes. And it was Peter, her brother, who survived.
And Aunt Martha changed Peter into Angela.
She basically brainwashed Peter to become Angela because that's who she wanted her to be.
So Angela is, this probably very confused and doesn't know what's going on, but this all leads up to this climax of the end of this film.
It's an iconic scene. If you have ever heard about this film or seen this film, then you know.
I suppose this is why it's a cult classic. This ending scene.
It's unlike any other.
Yes. So there's the humming and rocking back and forth.
Just kind of singing. Yeah, a little song.
You see the back of Angela, and then you see some cradling of Loverboy Paul's head. And you're like, oh, this is weird. Angela also appears to be naked without clothing.
And you don't realize at the time where Paul's body might be.
I'm getting there.
Sorry. Okay. God, sorry, I jumped ahead.
It's just Paul's head. It is not
that she's cradling.
Yes, It's Paul's head that she's
severed
cradling.
Head.
Yes.
I should mention.
And then we get to see another shot of a jump scare almost. This is what caught me off guard because I wasn't scared this entire time. And then I was like, oh shit, there's blood over Angela, quote unquote Angela. And we see Paul's severed head and it's dripping of guts and gore. And it looks like she's been eating him.
It's definitely not clear, but it's how did you sever his head and why are you cradling it? And she definitely has blood all over her. So it can be implied that there's some weird stuff going on with his body.
And I think maybe the why is different than the how.
Yeah.
Of that sentence. So that's what we see. And then I'll let you take this away because this is what I did not expect.
Yeah. So Angela stands up and turns around to face Ronnie and Susie. She has her mouth gaping open with her eyes wide, and she makes the most horrific and just creepy hissing sound from her mouth. And it is a full shot of her, quote unquote, naked body, and it pans down to show a male's genitals on this body. And it is very shocking. It is a huge twist. And suddenly, everything starts to make a little bit of sense. And then Ronnie, he says, my God, she's a boy. And she's sort of snarling. And then that's it. It literally cuts immediately to credits.
So that's literally it. And I said my parents watched the second one. And I was like, before I even watched the first one, I was like, I'm not going to watch the second one. Whatever. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, do I watch the second one?
Well, I have heard some of the ones that were made after. I don't want to call them sequels because they're not official sequels. Really have not a lot to do with the first film. We did want to address some of the things here that are definitely very problematic. This film in the cult horror community is known for being, a lot of people would label it as homophobic, transphobic. There's a lot of themes here that are very hard to talk about. Especially in this day and age, now that we're reviewing this film and there's a lot of backlash against, the trans community. But I will say I did read a very, very wonderful article about the take on this film from the lens of a trans woman who talked about this film and how if we go back to at the time of 1983 when this came out, there really wasn't a lot of trans representation just in general, let alone this film, anything. And so this really was very much before its time.
I agree.
And all of the themes of queer love and, gender identity, bullying too, for not being like sure of who you are. These are all things that can really translate to some of our queer trans youth today and how they feel in a lot of these different situations. So I don't necessarily see it like I wouldn't say it's all like transphobic necessarily, but I do think it brings up a lot of good points of conversation.
Again, like you said, it's before it's time to bring up those points.
Very much before it's time.
To bring up that discussion.
Yeah.
Like we're discussing it now. Like, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah. And I won't lie to you guys, when we first decided to review this movie, we were like, okay, are we prepared to, talk about some of these themes? And, I think as this is such a classic in slasher horror, like without a doubt, we have to touch on it at some point, whether it was now or down the line. And, Ali and I are very much supporters of loving who you love and being who you are in this life. And I do think that some of the actors that are in this, even now, they have made such a point to keep that going when they talk about this film. And even years later, 40 years later, it is still such a classic in slasher and horror that it's still being talked about and it's still garnering, a lot of these conversations that we're having. And I think that's really important that some of these themes are still alive and well, because this is something that does need to be talked about. The fact that Angela was so shy and timid and just not comfortable with herself and bullied so much, that is something that translates to trans youth today. And that's something that, we need to talk about, and we need to talk about why that's a thing and why that's happening. And, it definitely brings up a lot of points of conversation. And we're definitely very curious to hear, everyone's thoughts too on the film.
It made us think a lot. So we got a lot of,
I wasn't expecting it. I don't think anybody, when you watch this film, you're not expecting this at all. Like going into it, we went into it a little bit blind.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Like we'd never seen it. And, my Uber driver, I was talking to Emma and we were like, should we cover this one? And I was talking to my Uber driver and he said, do it. Let's bring up this conversation. And I was like, all right, let's do it. It's 2023. Let's bring this conversation up and support it. Yeah.
I had a lot of people that I had told about this film, like, hey, we're going to touch this film. It's a little bit touchy, we're a little bit like, don't know how we feel about it exactly. And I actually read an amazing article from a trans woman named Alice Collins. And she has an lovely article on bloodydisgusting.com. And she talks about Sleepaway Camp and the elephant in the room, which is about being trapped by gender. And I think that it brings up a lot of really good themes about the film and just about exploring your sexuality, gender identity as a teen. And, it's something that we didn't want to just like shy away from, because it's super easy for us to be like, oh, let's not do this film and let's just forget about it. But we definitely wanted to bring it up because it is such a classic horror film at its core. And like that ending scene, it shook
horrifying.
Yeah, truly. Like, and so Ali, I guess that brings us to one of our questions that we ask at the end of every film is if you thought it was scary.
And I think I touched on this a bit earlier. Was it scary as a whole?
No.
It was a true summer slasher classic.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, I had not seen it and I did not expect that ending. So I was like, it might keep me up tonight.
Yeah.
Because that last scene, I'm like, oh shit, like I did not expect that.
She becomes something sort of otherworldly, where she's snarling, and it's definitely like not humanistic at all. So I think that's a part to me that really scared me and shook to my core.
If you've seen Barbarian, I kind of
getting some vibes there.
Yeah, getting some Barbarian vibes right there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I also want to note one thing too is, they do show a male's genitals, and that is not the actor Felissa Rose who plays Angela throughout the entire film. This actually was a body double where they only used Felissa's face, but the body was actually a gentleman named Archie Liberace. And he was Ali, do you remember exactly what
he was? Like a college student. He just needed money.
Yeah, he needed money. He's 100% over 18.
And you can see like
he's credited on IMDb as Naked Angela.
Yeah, so you can see in the some of the shots during that, you can see him changing in the background.
Yeah.
Which is on the trivia. And I was like, oh, okay. Because you can.
Yep. Kind of interesting. But Like, what an interesting film to dive into. And we're definitely very curious to hear all of your thoughts. You know, thank you all so much for sticking with us on this. And before we end things today, I think, oh, sorry.
I have like a really random fun fact.
Oh my God, please.
So young Peter, like the young Peter.
Young Peter. Yeah. Uh-huh.
You'll never guess this, but I'm going to give you 2 guesses.
Oh my God.
Young Peter's brother is who? Think high school, like reality TV.
Wait. I know this. I read this in the trivia. Oh my God. Peter is played by, I think that it's Mike the Situation from Jersey Shore. It's his older brother.
Yes.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about that. That is a fun fact. GTL, baby.
Gym Tan Laundry. We have some royalty in this shit.
Oh my God.
I know.
And then James Earl Jones' dad is also.
Yes, of course.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And I also want to mention too that actually some of these actors, like Felissa Rose, is literally an icon in cult horror now to this day. And she... Looking at her filmography, she's amazing. She has almost exclusively done low-budget horror films since this film.
Good for her.
And she also comes back in Return from Sleepaway Camp, which is really cool. Also, Catherine has also been in quite a few shows, who plays Meg. Jonathan has been in quite a few horror movies, who plays Ricky. And then Chris, who plays Paul, her love interest, Angela's love interest, has voiced a lot of animated characters. And one thing I wanted to note, which thank you for making me go back to this, Allie, is Chris has a credit in a short miniseries that me and my dad watched when I was younger in 1995 called The Langoliers.
Stephen King.
Are you serious?
Oh my God, bitch. Are you kidding me? Do you know who I am?
As if I couldn't love you more.
Thank you. Of course I've seen it.
Oh my God. The Lego, wasn't it so good?
So good.
Oh my God. Okay. Anyways, we'll have to maybe do that one later.
Let's do that.
But yeah. And then a couple other fun facts about this film too is that it became such a hit after that it was made that it actually made 30 times more than the budget, which is insane. So wild. And then the official body count also for all the kills was actually 13. And I would recount that for you right now, but I have had a little bit of wine and I don't think to your benefit that would, be good for me to.
Also, I don't think you'd remember half the characters that would be on the body count.
Like, I'd like to do this like offline maybe, but
if you're interested.
Yeah, but yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming through on this wild ride that is Sleepaway Camp.
This was a weird one.
This was a weird one. But before we officially end things, we obviously have to answer our trivia question. So, Allie, do you want to start us off with question 1?
I shall. Question 1. Who was the first person to be killed at the camp?
Artie.
It is Kenny.
Oh, it is Kenny. You know what? I wrote this in my notes. I'm so pissed because Artie did not technically die. At least we didn't see him die.
That's not fair.
Kenny was the first one to actually die. That's a trick question. And I love it. So number 2, what state was this film shot in? New York. That was my answer. Was that your answer?
That was mine too.
Okay, good. Because you sang along, so I just wanted to assume.
I also told you at the top that I knew this answer. So.
I assumed because they do not say it in the film, but it's definitely very evident just from some clues, some context clues.
You just look at the IMDb page.
Okay, well, you know what?
Okay.
Oh, it's cheater.
Okay.
Anyways.
Number 3. What was Angela's first line in the movie?
Teenage Angela.
Teenage Angela.
Good night.
I got that too.
Okay. But who did she say it to?
To Paul. Lover boy.
Lover boy.
Hey.
LBP.
So we're like tied.
So we tied.
Bitch. Where's our tiebreaker?
Ooh, yeah. What's our tiebreaker?
No, I'm kidding. Let's not.
Oh, okay.
Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks. We so appreciate you listening, and we can't wait for you to listen to our next one.
And we want to point out that if you're not following us on social media already, you can follow us on Instagram at Spooky Chicks Horror Flicks. We also have a Patreon page as well with 3 different levels that you can subscribe to support us. And then if you are so inclined to review our podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you are curious as to our next films that we will be reviewing, we definitely encourage you following us on Instagram, which is where we will be announcing everything. And we are Spooky Chicks and Horror Flicks.
Stay spooky, fuckers.